Welcome back to another episode of Romance Unleashed. We are in Ohio today with Kate Goldbeck. Hi.
Hi.
Who are you, Kate?
What a question.
I know. You tell us where you want to start.
Well, I'm sort of an author of one book.
You're fully an author.
But that's like kind of a side hustle at this point almost. But yeah.
And the book is called?
The book is called You Again. And then I have more books in the works. I'm just taking a very long time for the rest of the books to materialize.
Okay.
But yeah, romance author. I live in Atlanta.
Okay. And you're here for the festival?
I'm not here for the festival, but my boyfriend is from Columbus. So we're actually staying with his family. And it just so happened to coincide with the Columbus Book Festival, which is great.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's actually a family trip. But my next book is set in Columbus.
Okay.
So it's also, and I'm like editing it now, so it's a little bit of research. Like I can kind of fix some things in person and things like that. So it's kind of like worked out very nicely.
Is it part of the You Again world, or is it totally separate?
The You Again-averse? No, it's totally separate, I think. Unless I feel like sometimes publishers are like, can you
tie it in?
Can you like add some of the characters like popping up? But no one's asked me to do that.
Okay.
And so far it's like completely different.
So when did you start writing You Again?
I think it must have been 2018.
Okay.
It started when I was just like devouring fanfic.
Okay.
I must have been in like a weird headspace because I was just like completely obsessed with reading fanfic and recommending it.
Okay.
So I started writing because I was just like literally getting on Tumblr and being like, I just read, this fic, and I would write like a long essay, like a personal essay kind of recommendation about it. And that's kind of how I like found friends and met authors and stuff. Cause I just like come screaming into people's DMs like, oh my God, I just read your like, Omegaverse, whatever. And I love you. And then at some point I was like, I think maybe I can like write fanfic too. Like, why not? And I hadn't really ever tried to write anything before that that's like stories or fiction necessarily. So it was just like a totally like, let's try it, creative endeavor. And so I started writing the fic that eventually kind of got turned into You Again. Okay. And I wrote a bunch of other fics like kind of during and after that.
What kind?
Well, it was all in the Raylo fandom, which, I would love to write in other fandoms, but now I just like don't have the time to do it. Maybe I will. But at that point, it was like a huge part of my life, which is so weird to say now because it's not really even a thing anymore. But I mean, it is to some people. But for me, it's sort of just like there. Sure. But yeah, I spent a lot of my time reading in that fandom and then writing it and then also just like being in fandom and like meeting people and chatting with people. And like eventually a lot of those people became like really good real life friends, which is like the whole point. But yeah, my other fics were more, I wrote some like canon verse, but I'm not very good at writing like Star Wars. Okay. It's just a lot. Right. It's a lot more work.
Right.
But I wrote some like modern AUs and some shorter stuff. And I wrote one that was kind of like my favorite one actually is a like 1960s kind of country singers AU, which is sort of like a walk the line kind of thing. Okay. And that was really fun because it was totally different than anything I had ever tried. Right. And it's kind of the one where I'm always trying to like ask my agent, like, what do you think I could maybe but it's like, it doesn't go. Yeah. It's like not part of my brand probably. So I don't think anyone would ever go for that, but I feel like it's sort of like a Daisy Jones kind of thing. So it's like, why not?
Right.
So I'm still.
Would you ever think about indie pubbing it?
Oh yeah, I would love to be indie, and maybe I shouldn't say that. I would love to do both. I feel like the people who are doing it like best and living their best author lives are doing both.
Right.
Because there are things that trad pub is awesome for, and there are things that just, it's like, for me, indie feels more like the sort of freewheeling world of fanfic.
Right, the like creative freedom
you think of something and there's no one to stop you, which is like terrible, but
I was about
great.
to say, it's like terrifying, but also like, yes, queen.
And you just start it, and like in fanfics even more, because you can post a chapter, nobody has stopped you, and then all of a sudden you have people who are like, when's the next chapter?
Right.
And then you have to, or else you'll just never hear the end of it if you stop. And there's some legendary like Raylo fics that were like never finished that like still to this day were like, where's Summer Heat? You know, where's Isha Ren?
Right.
And you know, it's like they're probably just living great lives and will never return to it.
Right.
But like there's thousands of people who are still like, you never finished, you know, you never finished that Omegaverse fic. So yeah, that's like a Wild West kind of world, but yeah, I feel like there's definitely overlap in indie publishing, and I think that's really cool. I kind of like love the creativity in indie, and I just don't think trad pub is ever gonna let people be like different in a way. Because romance, I'm gonna get on my soapbox, but sometimes romance is too much all the same, because trad pub works off of comps, what's worked before, and like kind of like your brand. Right. And so if you step too far outside of it, they get nervous, which I understand because it's a business. Right. But when you're indie, you can do 5 different things, and you know, it's like that's what you're doing, and it's fine.
And to that argument, right, too, like with trad, like, sure, right, I get it, it's a business, but also, like, how are you supposed to know if things work if you're not trying something different?
Right, and someone always has to be the first one to jump in the pool, and like trad pub doesn't really want to. I think what they're doing now is it's like they're acquiring really successful indie books it's like, oh, this person cracked it, and then once they pick that up and like it's successful in trad, then it's like, okay, like now we can get more books that are like in this kind of niche, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I wish they just did more like batshit crazy acquisitions.
Well, I think they tried that out with like Ice Planet Barbarians. You know? Like I would have never expected Berkeley to pick that up. Or
that
even
was cool.
Even like Penelope Douglas now, like some of her darker stuff, and I'm like, Berkeley, are you good? Like, because it's just not things that they've traditionally picked up. So to your point, like I do see them trying out these things with books that have been successful already. But it would be nice to see them picking up things just without any of that prior like indie backing.
Like, what if somebody just went on submission with something, you know, totally wild that had not been done before? It's like, what editor's going to be like, yeah, I'll take this to acquisitions. I'm going to do it. And then some salesperson's going to be like, but we never, you know, like,
what are our comps?
Yeah, exactly. And they're not going to have anything. Yeah. So it's like, I understand that, but like, yeah, it's cool to just be able to be like, I'm writing a book about this, and like just put it out there and like see what happens.
Right. For those who haven't read You Again, what's it about?
It's kind of I guess I'm going to describe it how I've heard it described to me. It's like a millennial kind of twist on When Harry Met Sally that's a little bit gender swapped. Okay. So the woman is sort of the Harry character who's kind of like I hate the term free spirit, even though I think it's even in the blurb, but like she's just very casual about sex and very like avoidant when it comes to relationships. And then, I love that. Yeah. The man is sort of the more uptight, like the Sally, and a little more like traditional in how he thinks about relationships, and kind of it's kind of like they hate each other at first. I don't like to use enemies to lovers because I feel like that's, you know, a lot of people feel like that doesn't belong in the modern sort of contemporary romance world because they don't want to kill each other. But they hate each other at first, and then they kind of develop a friendship, and then it kind of turns into like a fuzzy, do we actually want to be in a relationship thing? And of course, it then has a happy ending.
There's something that I've heard lately with books like this where like the woman is more like avoidant, where like a lot of women resonate with it because for so long and romance has always been kind of the opposite, right? And so for women who are avoidant, like, and are working through that kind of stuff, they never see themselves reflected in the main character because it's always the man. Abby Jimenez has, I think, is it in yours truly? No, it's in Just for the Summer. Her main character is also very like detached. And I've had a lot of friends be like, this is such a great representation of like who I am and not being this like, I'm in love, which I'm the complete opposite. I'm like attached. Yeah. Like you blink at me and I'm like, marry me right now. But I think it's so nice to see it kind of like, I guess, challenge. So kind of like what romance usually is, I think.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is like, I get a lot of unlikable female character comments. And I feel like I don't know, maybe she is unlikable. I don't know. But I feel like that ties into it. It's like a double-edged sword. Right. I get people who are like, I feel very seen. And then I get people who are like, oh my God, she's so frustrating. Like, and it's like, I just don't think that people would feel that way if it's the man in the relationship that's portrayed that has those characteristics. It's like we forgive, and this was very true in fanfic and in the Raylo fandom specifically, because obviously like that's kind of how the characters like fall into line, usually like the archetypes, but it's like they will forgive that man doing literally anything. Yep. But if the woman character is like, does like one little thing that's a little questionable, it's just like, you'd get all these comments like, oh, like I hate her so much. I would get comments that were literally like, I want to slap her. It's like, what? Like, but what'd she do? Right. But yeah, I mean, I've been saying that it's sort of like the two characters are like two sides of my personality. It's like, I'm in some ways very much like a Sally and can be very like kind of uptight and like just stupidly judgmental and like kind of like crave structure. But then I have this other part of me that is a very like avoidant personality type. And there's this, if you follow personality types, there's like one of them is dismissive avoidant or avoidant dismissive, something like that. And it's like the black sheep of all personality types. It's like, the other personality types love to talk shit about dismissive, avoidant people because they're the ones who don't want to, who will just like leave and like ghost out of a relationship and then like not, like feel bad about it basically. Yeah. And there's definitely a side to me that is like, I do not want to spend the night. I would love to just get up right now and like leave. I'll leave at 3 a.m. and get on the train back to Brooklyn. I don't care. I'm not staying here. And that I have lived that and I feel that. So that, that's kind of where a lot of that stuff came from in the character. But I understand how some people, that is not something that they relate to. And they do want to cuddle. And honestly, I do cuddle now. I would say, I mean, people change too. And in different relationships, sometimes you become a different, you enjoy different things. And like now it's like, I love cuddling. I asked for more cuddles this morning. But, like a couple years ago, I would have never come to somebody's family's house on a vacation willingly and cuddled. Like I just wouldn't have wanted to do that. I would have wanted to be home in my own bed.
Well, and I think different people bring different things out of us too, right? And as we grow as people, we start liking things that maybe we didn't like before. I feel like I'm a lover girl through and through, so like I love cuddles, so that's never changed. But there are certain people where like I feel more comfortable in that, like, because I feel like cuddling is such a like soft. Like you're really letting your guard down. Like you're almost like allowing this person to protect you in a sense. And not everyone gives the same. Like,
you can't be vulnerable with like a one night stand most of the time. Right. Yeah. So it definitely does depend on the energy the other person is giving off. And I think for most of my life, I just like, I was never really in a relationship with a person that I felt like, oh, like I want to cuddle.
Right.
Until I was in like a very like long-term relationship with my ex. And then it was like, oh, like I'll be hugged. But like, honestly, on our first kind of like, not exactly our first date, but one of the first times we were hanging out, and I had been crying because that's the type of person I am. I meet someone for the first time and then I explain all my problems and I cry to them, you know, which is great kind of first date activity. And then, so I'm leaving his apartment and he asked, you know, can I hug you? And I said no. That was like a legend in our relationship for a long time. It's like I refused a hug, but I was also like, I don't know. It's like, no, I don't want to hug.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, maybe now I would hug. But yeah, it depends on what the other person, are they letting you feel
right? Like, what are they
vulnerable?
giving? What energy? Yeah. Like, because I feel like that has a lot to do with it too.
Yeah, 100%. And my boyfriend now, it's like, one of the first, I don't know why I'm saying this, but like one of the first times we spent the night together, I remember saying to him, like, I feel so comfortable.
Yeah.
And he was like, I feel comfortable too. It was just like one of those weird things where it's like, I never feel comfortable.
Right. And it just clicks.
Yeah. Not once in my life have I ever felt comfortable. It's like, I felt comfortable. It was like, you know, such like a nice feeling. And so, yeah, it's, you know, just totally, it's like a chemistry kind of thing or something that you can't force it.
Yeah, I agree. What do you do for your day job? Can you talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was really affected by COVID in terms of my day job. So what I had been doing when I first started writing was basically designing museum exhibits, which is kind of a weird niche, but I had basically had like my dream job, and we would travel all over the world in a sense, and usually go to like museums or other physical spaces that had interactive like elements, like, you know, like cool touch screens or things where like you move your hand and it makes a sound. Like that was like what we did. And when COVID hit, no one wanted to go to public spaces or touch anything. So our studio kind of like folded and shut down. And so I had to kind of like find like something similar to do. So essentially my title is like experience design, which is very a weird term. It's like, what is that? Well, it could be anything. It's like, you know, what happens when you walk into a restaurant? What is that experience? Or it could be like, I'm opening a mobile app and like, where do I tap? So yeah, actually, have had a few different jobs, all in that field since COVID, but actually worked for Amazon for a while, which was awesome in a lot of ways. And I really was like, oh, like this is a perfect, my book was about to come out. I was like, this is a perfect, like, you know, coming together of everything. But then I got laid off from our whole product got shut down. It was like a real like rude awakening.
Well, I think like a year or two ago, they went through like May.
Oh yeah. They laid off a lot of like parts of the business that weren't directly tied to like where they actually make money. Which is a whole other story. I have real mixed Amazon feelings. I understand why it's like so great for so many authors, but I also kind of like, I know the other side of it too. And also I got laid off, so like screw them. But would I work there again? Probably. But yeah, now I basically do the same. I'm still a UX designer, but I work for a company that like works for different clients. So right now I'm working for an airline and like helping with their mobile app. Okay. So it's like that experience is like. Yeah, it's like, you know, how do you, you know, find a seat easier or like get a pass to go to the lounge. So yeah, it's like it's not as like much in my heart as like working in museums was, because that's actually how I started. I was like a teacher. I was a museum educator. I worked in film museums, which is a really weird niche. Again, I don't know like how I did this, but I worked in like 3 different film and television museums when I was living in New York. Yeah. And that was always like, film was always my passion. Okay. So now I'm like a little bit away from that, but as a day job goes, it's like, it's pretty good. Would I love to write full time? Yes, I would love that. But I also love health insurance and actually having knowing when my money is going to come, which as an author, it's like twice a year, maybe. And then like whenever you sell foreign rights, it'll just be like, oh, like we get this little amount. And then you're like, okay, but then when do you get that?
Right.
So it's a very stressful way to actually make money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So until like that somehow like, you know, gets to be more stable, or I marry, you know, somebody very wealthy. Yeah, I'm not going to be writing full time probably.
What is in the work for you right now?
Well, I'm editing what will be my next book.
And when does that come out?
I don't know, actually. I'm hoping 2025. So usually romance authors do like a book a year. That's pretty standard. Sometimes they do more, which I'm like, wow, like you're incredible when you can do like 2 or 3 books a year.
I only released, 2, 3 this year?
Okay, let me say this. She sold Love Hypothesis like maybe a few months before I sold You Again. In the time since she's put out like 12 books and I've put out 1. So that should also tell you something about like the quickness in the writing and also the editing process.
Yeah. And it looks different for everyone.
Yeah, of course. And that I'm trying to normalize not, you know, like writing at your own pace and not burning yourself out, because I know a lot of other romance authors who, you know, are in the same position where they're like, oh, like I had to push out. I was picturing giving birth there, like push out book 2. When, you know, you're just like, you're overwhelmed from having to like figure out publishing for the first time. And actually, and I've made like TikToks about this being very vulnerable, and heard from other authors who are like, oh, like, I'm so glad you said something because I really feel pressure to like do it on this pace. But I only sold You Again as 1 book. I didn't do a 2-book deal. So I honestly, part of me was like, I may never write again. And honestly, I was sort of like, that might be okay. I don't know. And then I later, I don't know, it must have been like more than a year ago, signed another deal for 2 more books with Dial, which is my imprint. And so I was like, okay, and now so I wasn't ready with book. A lot of people have book 2
ready to go.
To go.
Right. They're just waiting for it to be picked up.
Yeah. And I did not have that. So, I started writing what I thought was going to be my second book around the time You Again came out. And then a few months into it was like, actually, no, I was like 30,000 words in. And like, really, I was like, this feels like a struggle. This feels like a real struggle. And I had to tell my agent and my editor, you know what? I got a different idea. And then they let me actually start writing a completely different book from scratch, like in January.
Do you think you'll ever go back to those 30,000 words?
Yes. So while I was writing this book that ended up being what will be my second book, I had an idea for kind of like a different take on that original second book. Okay. And I haven't really gotten it cleared yet completely, but it's like, because it's, you know, we're talking about everything kind of being the same. Obviously, my imprint ideally would like my next books to be kind of similar to You Again. Right. And I don't think I'm really doing that. So I'm kind of like asking for forgiveness instead of like a apology. Exactly. Thank you. So I'm really hoping that my third book will be what I want it to be, which is, and I don't want to spoil what it is, but it does involve, it's almost like an Ashley Poston-esque kind of magical realism.
Oh, I love that.
But sort of my take on it. Yeah. But it's like, I understand why they don't necessarily want that. Yeah. Because it's like, they want you to have a brand and stick with it. Right.
But that's a lot of fun.
I think so. I've never been excited to write a book, in all honesty. Like I usually feel like a dread or like, but in this case, I'm like, okay, I think I can really have fun with it. So I'm looking forward to getting to it, but I have to finish my next book. And then I'm just going to say this, because I don't know if it'll ever get announced, but I am working on the screenplay for You Again.
Amazing.
I've kind of like soft told people this, but like the way that optioning books works, it's like half the time you don't get to announce it for whatever reason. And I went through a real roller coaster with like potentially optioning the book. But the lucky thing for me was that like there was from different companies, a lot of them were interested in me adapting it, which is you usually don't get to do that.
Right.
And being a film person, I was gonna say, I feel like yeah, please. Yeah. So yeah, I am actually writing a draft of the screenplay. Should it ever come to fruition, honestly, they might hire someone to change it. Right. I don't know, but which is fair. Maybe authors shouldn't adapt their own books, but. What I've heard from people who are like in the industry is that, you know, it kind of read a bit like, probably because I've written screenplays and hadn't written books. Like I kind of wrote it thinking of it like, how would this be a movie? Right. So it actually has been like super fun to do what I had actually envisioned, which wasn't a book. It was actually more of a movie. Yeah. So now I can do all kinds of things that you can't do when you're writing a novel. Like I can do like a montage, and like, I don't know, just different like film techniques. So that's been really fun. I was actually like texting friends while I was working on it, being like, I've rediscovered my love for writing. Like, I think this is what I was meant to do, and I never feel that way. So yeah, so that's been fun, but I'm still kind of like finishing that up. Okay. So but once all that's done, then I can start on the book 3.
But it has been optioned.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if I can actually say that, but it has. Right. I mean, I don't know. What's the point of not announcing? I don't know.
Well, and like optioning, for people who don't know, right? It's like it gets optioned, but it might never go into production.
Most of the time they don't. Right. Like 90% of the time, like it kind of stops there. But the further along you get, the more advantageous it is for the author. It's like, oh, like, and now there's a director attached or whatever. Right. But honestly, the whole process of that, and you can't really talk about it, but like there were some of the most exciting emails I've ever, like ridiculous and like probably not that true, but also really exciting emails. And it was, oh, so-and-so has the book, or like so-and-so is interested. And I got to like get on Zoom calls with like some actor people who I won't mention, but you know, and it's just like, oh, like, you know, you look like an angel. Yeah. So yeah, that whole thing was like very exciting, and then also kind of sucks when things don't, because things never go as you really ideally want them to. And then you're like heartbroken, but then like something else happens and you're like, oh, never mind. Like, yeah.
You kind of just have to roll with the punches.
Yeah. And it's the type of thing that you can't really talk about until it's announced. So like whenever you see someone, like I think Regina Black's announcement, like it happened in December, but like somebody discovered it, and so people were talking about it again, which I read it again. I was like, I thought that already happened. I was like happy for her all over again. Right. And then I was thinking, it's like, yeah, like no one ever hears about the part of the process where it's like, it doesn't get optioned, or like, you know, like things fall through, or like it just kind of, your thing expires, which is usually what happens. It's like, there's no announcement about that, even though that's usually what happens.
Right, because things get optioned so that they have first rights basically to bring it into TV
it's like
production.
We're the company that's allowed to work on this, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually going to do anything.
So if it's like a 3-year thing, after 3 years, they could just choose to not re-up those rights, and then it's just back for whoever wants to.
And with like the writer's strike and like the actor's strike, a lot of those options got like lengthened to account for that. So there's people who have been, you know, whose books got optioned like a few years ago who are still like, is it going to happen? Right. But
and I think too, there might, or maybe you might have a better pulse on that, but is there like a better like now that we're noticing more and more like Netflix and Amazon and like all of these places picking up more romance books and turning them into TV shows, that there's more of like, I don't know, like renaissance to like for romance books to become like it sells.
I mean, that's logical, right? It's like, here's the thing I don't understand. They're relatively inexpensive to make as opposed to a lot of other things that get produced. And they're real star vehicles. Like if an actor or an actress wants to like show their charisma and like a little bit of themselves. It's like a rom-com or a romance is like the thing they should be in. And all these actors keep saying, oh, I want to be in a rom-com. It's like every week it's another person who you're like, oh, they've never done that. And it's like, they're like, yeah, I want to be in a rom-com. Where are they? Right. It's like, I feel like a lot of books do get optioned, but like very few actually make it through. And even the most successful, I'm not going to name names, but like there's a few people who have had enormous hit books that got optioned and everyone has been super excited for like several years. But it's like, why haven't they prioritized this? Like this is like a great way for somebody to make money.
Absolutely.
And people will even go to the theater. Like, so my boyfriend runs a movie theater. And so, I sometimes, see like, oh, what are people actually going to? People do go to movie theaters to see rom-coms because it's a good date, and people will always need to go outside the house to go on a date. It's like, that's why I feel like movie theaters will always survive, because you got to go places.
Unfortunately for me, honestly, like I would rather not go outside to find a date, but here we are.
Well, fair. But like anyone but you, like people were like flocking to the movie theater to see that.
Right.
And it's like, how were there not 5 other rom-coms announced within like a day of that like box office news for that? It's like, it's probably misogyny, but
well, and I feel too with like romance being a best-selling genre, like I feel like the money left on the table is a little ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean it's literally like there is a built-in audience. Again, like they usually don't require crazy sets and locations. Like it's usually taking place in real life, and like I said, it's a great platform for actors to like, like show a little bit of themselves and show how like hot and charismatic they are. And so why? I don't know. But yeah, I think the answer is probably misogyny. And just the people who make the decisions are not clued into our world.
Right.
And so, the people who are attempting it often tend to be women or, people who are a little bit marginalized and are like living in this world, but don't necessarily have the power to greenlight things at Netflix.
So surprisingly enough, this past year for SimuLitCon, we've received like a crazy amount of like people who do book to film adaptations. Like last year we had a couple, but this year we probably get like an email a week about it. And I'm like, but are you actually gonna do something with it?
Yeah. Like, or do you have the power to, honestly, it's also, I will say the other thing is it's a really hard time for things to get greenlit and for people to put money into things in Hollywood. And part of it is because of streaming and the fact that there's no clear path for streamers to make money. So a lot of like, that's why a lot of like Netflix, Amazon shows, they don't get picked up for season 2, even when they're kind of successful, because it's like they're not seeing actual revenue on those things yet. They're just trying to get people to subscribe. So now that's why they're putting in commercials. It's like, how do we make money on this? So it's like everyone I've talked to in this whole process has been like, it's a really hard time to sell scripts. It's a really hard time to like option books. So I feel like it's overall kind of slow. But I mean, there's like a potential, it's like when some producer figures out, it's like almost like the A24 or like Blumhouse or whatever. It's like when you find your like niche and you understand how to make money and you can kind of keep doing that and you have a brand, whoever does that as a producer is going to like do amazingly well with romance and like romance adaptations because there's a huge market there.
The community is
there.
Strong and
the
thriving.
Creators are there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, think about all the book talk creators also making content about your film or your series. It's like and people want to talk about
it. And they will, right.
Yeah.
And even if it's like negative, right? Like you don't like it, they're still going to talk about it. And people are going to like agree or disagree. Like The Idea of You was not my favorite. The book was my shit.
We had I watched The Idea of You. I was in New York with Allie Hazelwood and Julie Soto. I shared a bed with Allie, tiny double bed for like a week.
To go
we had a great, and it happened to come out like the one of the days we were in New York. So we were sitting in our beds. We put on Amazon, and we had an amazing time. It was also kind of like a little like I know it's not technically a fanfic, but it's in that world. And so for us, it was almost like a full circle moment, because we're all like fanfic. People always get yelled at for having done fanfic. It's like, look what she did. Like, this is like a real movie with movie stars. And like, it was like fun to watch. And we were like singing the songs afterward. And, it was fantastic.
Yeah, because it's not fan fiction, but kind of, and then
come on,
right. And I think I just wanted more passion out of all of it. Have you read the book?
I haven't read the book, but I'm kind of curious to. And what did you think about the ending? Because I know they added kind of a more hopeful.
Right. I mean, I was fine with the ending. Okay. I think it was more like I wanted more of that like passion that you saw in that like taboo age gap. I could not see that on screen, and then I just felt like Anne Hathaway, like she's a great actress, but like sometimes when she would like give these like face caresses, they felt very like motherly, and they didn't feel like I'm gonna tear your clothes off right now.
That's a good point.
It felt like I'm gonna feed you an apple right now. And like I needed like the book was so hot. Like they were like
the book is like how many chili peppers, if we're gonna I don't love the chili pepper scale, but is it like I
don't remember, but I think I clearly remember them like fucking on a boat, and I think that's how things get out, maybe because her like paparazzi sees them fucking on photos a boat, and like nice. And so like we don't get that, like I needed it more forbidden. I needed more like, and it just
leaning more into the sort of taboo.
Right. That's what I fully wanted.
I do love anytime there's something a little bit transgressive, like a little age gap. And I know sometimes people are not cool with that, but I am. Same. Like, please, I'm into it.
Feed me all the taboo. I'll take it any day. I mean, like, maybe not like incest, but like, unless we're talking about like House of Dragons, then like by all means.
Yeah, then like, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, like please fuck your uncle. Like, I'm here for it. But not in real life. Probably not in my romance books. But in Dragon World, that's totally fine, because it just makes sense. Like, you're trying to keep the blood strong, so like go off, queen.
You need to be able to, handle those dragons, and if the way you're gonna do it,
you have to keep the blood pure.
That's
so
right.
like incest is the only way to go, and that's totally acceptable. My God. Anyway.
This could go down a whole different road.
Yes, it really could. What is a trope that you haven't written or in the process of writing that you would love to write?
Okay, that's a great question, because I will not be stopped by people not liking a trope.
Okay.
So my next book is actually a trope that I don't like, which is there's a few. It's a single dad romance.
Oh, I love a single dad.
But I am living my boyfriend is a single dad. So I only started writing this after we got together, and I wouldn't have tried to do it. But the reason I don't like single parent is that I tend not to like the kid characters. I just sometimes, especially in historicals, I always like feel like they're like too cute, or they're like urchins. Which is like a great like bad word for like kids, but I find sometimes like it's really hard to write a compelling child character in a romance. It's like you kind of just want them to like move aside, like this is not about you, but they kind of have to be there. So somehow I ended up now writing a single dad romance, but there's age gap, because he is older. And it might be problematic. I don't know. I've asked some people their opinion on the age gap that I've written, and I'm getting like very different, and even my own boyfriend thinks it's problematic.
Okay, what is it?
Well, right now, and I might have to change this. She's 26 and he's like 39.
No.
Is that problematic?
No.
I don't think that's problematic.
That's not at all. We're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Thank you. He's a little bit like, I don't think so.
Penelope Douglas put out like 19-year-old, and I think Daddy Pike is like probably 40. you're good. Like, we're
right. Although that was kind of the point of that book. I feel like that really was like, here you go. Like, I'm serving up,
Right.
Whereas it's not really like supposed to be the biggest factor in this book. It's like kind of just like one of many things.
I think 26 and 39 is totally fine.
So.
Like, that's a good age. Your frontal lobe, I think, is fully developed by now. Like, yeah, go get you some daddy.
Yeah.
You know?
So that's what I'm going with. Okay. But yeah, there's also a small love triangle. That's the part I'm like, everyone is always complaining about love triangle. Good. But yet everyone's favorite, we were talking about like K-dramas, everyone's favorite like classic sort of like romance stories of the last 20 years, they're all a love triangle. Yeah. So why do you claim to hate it so much? I don't know. I think
there's just a big like stigma, right, with like cheating in a sense, because people, I think when relationships aren't like societal approved, right, like people are like, can't, but like secretly, like, why not? I love a love triangle.
You can be torn between people, but also not necessarily be in a cheating situation too. Yeah. It really depends on the dynamic, but
I agree.
But yeah, it's kind of inspired this aspect of it by this movie Reality Bites, which is like a very 90s like movie. It's not exactly a rom-com, but there's definitely a love triangle in it. And so it's kind of a little bit inspired by that. It's just like two very different potential romantic possibilities.
Right.
So I don't know. I like it. I love a love triangle.
Me too.
And so I'm doing it. Yeah. And if people don't like it, then they don't have to read it.
Facts. I recommend this series all the time, but Candy Steiner's What He Doesn't Know is a lovely love triangle.
Okay. Candy Steiner.
It's 3 books.
Okay.
The first 2 books are like the love triangle.
Yeah.
And the 3rd book is like the person she does not end up with. Oh. It's their love story.
Oh, they get a different. I love that.
Happily ever after for everyone.
Yeah.
But if you start it, you're not going to stop.
Okay.
It's so good.
Okay.
Where can people find you online?
Kate Goldbeck, pretty much everywhere.
Okay.
I think, yes. So yeah, that's my website. I'm mostly on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. I'm very chaotic on TikTok. I watch a lot of TikTok. I don't make a lot of TikToks, but when I do, it's usually I'm saying things I probably should not say.
What side of TikTok are you on?
Well, I love drama from other communities. I actually try not to watch Book Talk because you always see things you don't. You're like, I don't want to know what somebody thinks about this. But I'll definitely fall into like the sepia tone, like wedding, like rabbit hole, or like when Bama Rush was happening. It might be coming up again this year.
Probably.
I was all over that. And after the whole America's Sweethearts Dallas Cowboy, I was on Dallas Cowboy cheerleader analysis talk for a long time. When Challengers came out, I was on Challenger talk.
I have to watch it still.
What?
I know.
What?
I know. I'll report back.
Why haven't you?
Well, I don't watch a lot of TV, mainly because work. But
see, I also saw that in the theater with Allie and Julie.
That has to have been a time.
Allie hadn't seen it yet.
There is this show that me and Susan told Allie to watch the other day. What's it called? It's on Amazon. It's about like a boarding school. Is it Maxton Hall?
Okay.
Yes.
That's on my list.
It is so good. Allie was screaming in text messages. And when Allie screams, it's like the best thing.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, last question. Fuck, marry, kill. Any trope.
Okay, I have had time to think about this. Well, and we've touched on this a little bit. Fuck would probably be age gap. Marry,
my kind of person.
Marry, probably enemies to lovers. It's just a classic for a reason.
Wow. Most people fuck enemies to lovers. Okay.
Well, continue. If you're married, you're also going to be, but it's going to be regular.
Right.
It's not going to be a one-time thing.
Right.
And there's lots of variations on enemies to lovers. So you do want to be there for the long haul. Kill. I mean, honestly, I think it's accidental pregnancy, which I feel like that is such a divisive trope.
I hate accidental pregnancy.
I just personally, like, I don't like to think about it.
Me neither.
And actually, I'm a strong, by the way, some people write amazing accidental pregnancy, and this is no slander on them. But
I agree.
I am also trying to do almost the inverse of that in my books from now on, which is to put like more like reproductive choices in the book and like talk openly about like abortion and like have characters who have had abortions like talking about it, because I do feel we need to do both.
Yeah. I agree.
So yeah, that's the one where I will maybe be like, but honestly, I'll read anything. Yeah. It's all execution for me. So I'm not a person who will put down a book because it has a certain trope. It's like certain people can do literally anything and I'll just like eat it up.
Yeah. Yeah, like I feel like I've read accidental pregnancies and secret babies are like not my jam. Like I kill them off every single time, and I'm a hater through and through. Like #1 club hater for both. But I have read a couple that have been executed really well, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. Not like all the time, but like that was good. That was fine. And interestingly enough, there's a reporter that comes to the LA Times Book Festival every year, and she always asks me like, how are you seeing romance like start capturing our current state of like reproduction rights? And I'm like, honestly, I'm not. For example, Meet Cute Bookshop in San Diego, they do like a reproductive rights auction every year to raise funds. So you see things like that, but I feel like in romance writing, we're not seeing it, but I also think there's a delay, right? Like we know, obviously indie, you can go off and do whatever you want, but when you're trad pub, you sometimes write the book 3 years before it actually publishes. So I was like, I think we need to wait a couple more years to see like what comes out of that. But I think it would be really lovely to see, because I think with everything, all the attacks on our reproductive freedom, it's very important for us to also just like be mindful of that when we're talking about sex and reproduction.
That's such a great point. And it's like one of those things where it's like, even safe sex is such a challenging issue and like some of my favorite romance authors like are just like, whatever. It's like, it's like just no condom.
Condoms don't exist.
Right. Which you know what? It's a lot of times when romance is escapist, it's like fine. And as a reader, I can put that aside, but I will never, it's like, I will always probably have to represent safe sex in my books, like outright on the page. And whatever reproductive freedom is like. And I did put my character in my next book, there's a conversation about how she had an abortion and the man too. And I remember asking some of my author friends, like, is this, cause I had a feeling, I was like, I feel like I might get a note on this. And they were like, just do it, like go for it. Like, so, so far so good, but I think it's just, we have to normalize things that are part of our actual lives, and we can't just put the blinders on 100% of the time.
Yeah, I agree. So. And I think too, with like, even like the condom conversation, I feel like, again, right, there's always so much pressure on like the women or folks who have vulvas to like be the ones who are actively like, do you have a condom, with no, that reflects too much on real life. So it's like, how can we normalize that so that we can also be comfortable with making sure that we know what to ask for and how to ask it, because we're reading romance to escape, but I feel like we're also learning a lot from it.
Especially with sex scenes, especially with things like toys. And it's like, the more those things are normalized and represented in sex scenes in books, I think the more on some level, the more comfortable the reader feels like having those conversations or introducing something that they were curious about into the equation. It's like, it's weird how that, I really do feel like that does affect people's real lives, because it's just like a comfort level. And like, even when you're talking to your partner, it's like a lot of people, like literally, especially men, they're oblivious to a lot of those conversations. And if there's a way to kind of like introduce that a little bit, it's like, that's, that's a great, it's almost like not a gift, but maybe it is a gift to kind of give someone like,
it's a good open, more of a, like dialogue gift.
It's like kind of introducing it in a way that doesn't feel like a lesson. It's like, here's a,
this is something I like.
Yes.
All right. And you can take what you want from it, but here are the highlighted portions.
Right. And it was like, I am a big believer that men should. Why are men reading romance?
Thank you.
Like they have nothing but, like things to learn.
Right.
And you should know what your partner is, enjoys. Just like as a reader, it's like, here are some of my favorite books and here are some of my favorite things. Right. Why not?
Right. And if you can tell me that you love the 48 Laws of Power or whatever, like you can also read Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. And I promise one is going to be a lot more informative than the other. So
exactly. I feel like women oftentimes end up adapting to what men enjoy. I mean, it's like I've read a lot of comic books in the past couple of years, and that's fine. And I love it. I've learned a lot. I watch a lot of TV shows I wouldn't have watched before. It's like, okay, when is it reciprocated? Right. Yeah, like here are the things that I also enjoy and want to watch or whatever. And it's like only good can come of that exchange.
I agree. So men, read more romance, please. Thank you, Kate, for joining us today.
Thank you. This is fun.
Okay. You can find us at Romance Unleashed Pod on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, and Threads. Okay, bye.